Hey there, readers and storytellers, and thank you for joining me on Story Unfolding, a show about changing the world through creativity, ingenuity, and intellectual discourse. We share meaningful conversations with creators, creatives, and dreamers who take it upon themselves to make a difference in the world. We have an influence on the world around us regardless of our intent. The only way forward is by confronting the hard truths, asking the tough questions, and letting your voice be heard. We are better together each day with our human story unfolding. Now, I am pleased to have Zelie Pollon, sorry, on with me today. Zelie is a journalist, author, and now coach, helping families travel the world and helping women learn about financial independence and real estate. Zelie recently published a book on how to travel the world long term, either solo or with your family. And her first Mexico retreat will be held this October in San Miguel de Allende in Mexico over the Day of the Dead. And I say this October, we're currently in 2023. Hopefully, you're watching this far in the future and you're seeing more of her retreats in the future.
There will be more. There will be more.
More, but yes, Zelie, thank you so much for joining me today. And I'm so excited to talk to you.
Well, thank you so much for having me and for having this platform where people can talk about ideas and ideas that hopefully challenge the way we live our lives and inspire us to live better.
Yeah, I'm excited to get into it. So I know I gave a brief intro for those of you who are, seasoned veterans of this channel, these video interviews kind of go hand in hand with a blog interview that will be posted on my website at michaelcamarillo.com. And those will be words directly from my guests. So Zelie's words directly onto my website will be posted as a blog post. So a lot of her, the in-depth answers to these questions can be found there. So this intro really was something that you wrote yourself about you. So I'd like to know, a little more from your words. Like tell us more about you to let us know who you are.
I am in transition. How's that? I've been a lifelong journalist. I covered New Mexico for a number of outlets for a number of years. And then I started really focusing in on war and war trauma. And I went to Iraq twice and did a big project, the Baghdad Project, interviewing people in Iraq, because I kind of felt like people in America never learn about countries unless we start bombing them. So this was this idea to kind of educate people about the humans, the human casualties of war. And from that, I went and I did graduate studies in conflict mediation. Excuse me. We don't say, conflict resolution anymore because that's not really there. So conflict mediation, and did my thesis with my son at the time, 3 years old, in Cambodia, really on survivors of the Khmer Rouge and the importance of storytelling, and the importance of just how much we need to own our stories and retell our stories to heal as well. After, doing all of this with my son, it became very hard for me to be completely embroiled in a world of trauma. And I realized that the root of that was really creating relationships and creating bridges and having people meet each other, not on the battlefield, but outside. And I had this one moment, even in Iraq, after a suicide bombing, and excuse me for getting graphic, but I mean, it was, as you can imagine, and I saw this wall of people standing, these young men watching everybody kind of clean this up. And I thought, those are the people who are being impacted. Those are the people we need to touch. And that was actually when I decided to go back to graduate school and really look at the roots of conflict and how we build relationships and how we build peace. And then travel came. I'm French, and so I'd always kind of traveled a lot. When my son was born, he learned to walk on a beach in Mexico. We had to go back to France every year until my grandparents died, and now it's a little bit less frequently. So it had always been part of my life. Excuse me. And then when my mother died, I was so overwhelmed with work and I'm a single child, so taking care of her. It's funny to even call it an estate. She built her own kind of crazy earth ship in the middle of the mountains in New Mexico. So having to deal with that and then the grief. So we hit the road. It was supposed to be a year of just stopping to kind of be calm and to recenter. And I started meeting these world schoolers, and I started meeting people who were doing this full time. And I thought, well, this is incredible. And their quality of life was amazing. And the people I met on the road, both American, European, Canadian, had this kind of openness. And many of them had had similar experiences to mine, where something had really challenged their life view, had challenged the way they think about security and safety and happiness and time. And they wanted more time with their families and for themselves, and they wanted less stress. And so, meeting these people really showed me that I also wanted that. So that 1 year ended in 4 years, and we only came back due to COVID because it was really restrictive where we were. And in New Mexico, where I have a base, I live in a co-housing community. And community is really important. It's important wherever you go and wherever you find it. And so my pod during COVID was, about 60, 65 people. And I think that really helped. It helped with the emotional stress of that, and the working stress, and my son having people to engage with, being able to go up into the mountains. Yeah, that was really important. But I used that time to take the interviews from all the people who I met on the road, because as a journalist, I can't stop interviewing people. I'm fascinated. I'm fascinated by people's stories, and everybody has a different story. It's beautiful. Even people, you make assumptions, and then you talk to them and you realize your assumptions are completely off, or maybe sometimes they're on point. But it's a really wonderful way to get to know people. So I just love doing these interviews. And so during COVID, I really kind of assembled them, as well as the lessons learned on the road. I mean, really, this book, and you have it in the back. Thank you so much. I also recorded my own audiobook because I used to be a radio editor of a news station at a public radio station too. But that was my first. I don't know, I hope it's, but it became a how-to, going to how do you prepare your house, and what's the best way to do it? What kind of things should you look for if you're hitting the road? What kind of visas do you need? What about vaccinations? Where can you meet other people? What kind of work can you take with you? So a lot of those kind of logistics, with also some stories of my own experience, and then interviewing various families who I met on the road. And I end each chapter with this fun, essential items. What made your traveling easier, and what helped you? What would you never leave home without after that? And that was the whole range. But again, a lot of people just said life was really hard, and I wasn't spending time with my family. And the whole goal of raising kids and giving them the best life is to also be with them, right? And so then we left. So my son and I are actually leaving back down to Mexico in September for several months. I did manage to buy a property in San Miguel de Allende, and the only way I could travel to begin with was actually house hacking. So I talk a lot about house hacking in this book, and how to use that for some kind of economic fluidity to help you. There are jobs on the road, of course, but there really are ways. I found the people I've met who have spent the longest time traveling and who have the greatest ease financially have been able to either, first buy a house, rent a house, sublet it, and then to use that to their advantage, as well as house sitting on the road. Trusted house sitters, if you haven't heard about it, talk all about it here. But so this is where we are now. And so this retreat that I'm holding is also for women middle-aged, my age, who are really trying to figure out, we don't know how many more years we have ahead, hopefully 50 more years, 60, who knows. How do we make that matter? How do we really make an impact and use this energy that we're harnessing, whether our kids are about to leave the house, or maybe some of us have never had kids, but we have a lot of power and a lot of energy, and we need to be putting a lot of positivity out there. And how do we do that? How do we really make it matter? So that's kind of what this is focused on. But I really also focus on real estate, because I've met so many women, and my mother also. I even wrote a blog about it, how she almost lost her house because she didn't understand quite the correct paperwork, I think that a lot of women aren't being as responsible about their own financial security, and I would like to encourage that. So that's also what this is about, whether you want to buy real estate in Mexico. I will certainly talk about real estate in Mexico, but also in the US, and just as a means for safety and doing it responsibly. And to have some kind, hopefully, of secure financial future, whatever that is. So that's a very long-winded response to
That's
who am
wonderful.
I?
There's so many things that I want to
I
unpack
know.
right now. I know that's why you sent me that message saying there's a lot to talk about in 20 minutes. There certainly is. Um, First, I want to rewind all the way back. So you said you were a journalist. How long were you a journalist?
I was a journalist about 25 years. So,
Okay,
and
and you were traveling a whole bunch for that, right?
I did, but mostly around the Southwest. I was based in New Mexico initially, and I covered the state for Reuters, People Magazine, Dallas Morning News. So kind of anything that happened here of national import. I mean, very often that had to do, well, for People, it had to do with like Julia Roberts, celebrities, but also oil and gas. I got some good stories in there. And then for Reuters, a lot around the national labs. We have national labs here. We had huge forest fires, a lot around that. So anything of national import that happened here, I would cover it. And then I would also do art pieces for local magazines as well. But I did that for many years. And then, as is happening in the entire media industry, both People, Dallas Morning News ended their Southwest section, I think. And People Magazine and Reuters kind of closed all of their bureaus in between. So I think they've since tried to pop up and do more, and offering me pay that I started with 25 years ago, and I'm like, but this is the world that journalists live in, which is also why I say I'm kind of in transition, because how do we find a different way of storytelling where we can also be supported and make an impact? Podcasting is a big one. Writing a book like this, I hope, is also a big way to do that.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting that you've had such an experience, such a vast experience of, the journalist storytelling aspect, and you've kind of, transcended, industrial development. There's so many different ways that I'm not saying aging you or anything. I'm sorry if that came out wrong. I'm sorry if that came out wrong, but you said 25
No.
years. So even, I mean,
but the industrial age, yeah, we don't need to go back that far.
not,
Okay.
not that far, not that far. But I mean, 25 years of journalism, a lot changes in just 5 years. So I mean, the means of storytelling have changed drastically. And I'm curious, have you seen like better or worse? What would you say like our ability to convey, the real story? What's your opinion on that?
I think it's incredibly challenging. I mean, it started out with outlets wanting to hire, kind of all sorts of bloggers. I mean, people coming in who would just kind of be in the field and then want to write about it without any kind of real journalism training in terms of structure, in terms of sources, in terms of not getting too involved. I'm thinking of the word here, but there was that. And now there's just kind of flat out fake news, whatever that is. I mean, people kind of generating stories that they say are real simply to promote kind of political agendas. And that's really scary, and it's unfortunate. And I'm sure it's happening on both sides, but you definitely see people generating these things and creating fear. I mean, the way that I see it is this kind of fear mongering and this kind of finger pointing, whether that be about immigrants coming into this country or, people who look different from you, or it's just these scare tactics that are just so divisive. And so I really see that in terms of individual people wanting to work in this industry now. There is so much demand now that you be your own photographer. You should also take video. You should be able to blog and then do all of the promotion on social media while also writing, long form and short form for social media. And by the way, we're going to cut your pay just a little bit, and you're freelance, so you don't get any kind of benefits. And I just felt like, wow. And maybe a young person out of school who just needs clips. And I think a lot of people do this. They go into the field like, yes, I'm going to do this. And then you realize you kind of have to make a living. And that is, that's just not going to work. So that's actually why I started going into my real estate. And it was a little bit by chance. I had some very, very lucky breaks. But I always say it subsidized my journalism career. So I mean, going into radio and having a full-time job, that helped a lot. But that also just the structure did not allow a kind of a freedom. And you always had to be careful what you were saying. And I felt like we're never quite telling honest stories. And of course, we all come from vastly different backgrounds. Many of us have radically different political views. I fall pretty much on a more progressive line. but in a way of wanting to promote fairness and human rights and promoting protecting the earth. I really feel like we're in a pretty critical place here. And I keep coming back to storytelling as a way for us to learn about each other and to learn about ourselves and just to build relationships. And if we can do this, if I can't stop Exxon or something from raiding the entire rainforest, what can I do here in terms of promoting kindness and having relationships and helping people? And I think I wrote in my questionnaire there, I mean, it's also part of a Buddhist practice of just trying to be kind. I was telling my son the other day, we were doing driving lessons, and I was like, sometimes you let the driver in front of you and you just smile and you say hello. And even though he didn't belong there, you just know that this small kindness means something, helping somebody with their groceries. So it's the big meta down to this micro, that if we can start generating it, we will also feel better. I mean, everyone knows that if you get in an argument with somebody or you have a negative interaction, it stains you, right? You carry that, whether it's big or it's small. So how do we then let that go and try to counter that with something kind? And that's the way I've found to do it. And it's not perfect. Oh my God, I try to be patient and I'm not. So, I certainly don't want to state that I have perfected this at all, but it's just a work. It's just a work that I do that I feel is kind of part of a daily practice now.
Yeah. Do you think, so you've met many people along your journeys. I'm curious if you think your background as a journalist has kind of made it easier for you to accept or immerse yourself in these cultures, to accept these lessons as they come, just because you're more inquisitive in nature. And if you found parallels with people you've met across the world.
Yes, and I think that those of us who are curious do far better traveling or interviewing. Curious and also an effective listener. I think that a lot of us are so eager as well to tell our stories that we don't listen. And I would like to think I'm a very good listener when I really focus in on someone to hear their story. And I think that is part of it. I mean, sometimes just human beings in the world, we all want to be heard, right? I mean, there's nothing better than having somebody like you saying, what is your story? What is it? And out in the world, not just in a formal environment like this, of course, but there's something very powerful in that, in really attentively listening to someone's story. So when I travel, it's the same thing. I'm completely fascinated by some of the different cultures and customs and the interactions. And I find, part of the reason I want to be in Mexico is just that I find that culturally it's just so warm and loving and kind and helpful, and all of these stereotypes only about cartel and violence and craziness. And there are cartels, but I always say to people, I'm more afraid to go drive an hour south to Albuquerque than I am to go to Mexico. I mean, you want cartels? We have them here too. So again, this idea of people to people, then you're not generalizing. And there are jerks out there. There are jerks everywhere, of course. But if you can go and make an effort to have a conversation with somebody, and maybe in a very kind and sincere way, and not just be extracting things from all of your travels, then I think you will have a richer experience and the people you're visiting will have a richer experience. Because I think that exchange can really go both ways. And if it doesn't go both ways, I don't think it's immensely healthy. I talk a lot in my book about a kind of a sustainable travel, because we know there's a carbon footprint in flying, and I have to do a lot of flying this year. And I think, how can I offset this? But slow travel, you talk a lot about service and about giving back and how we do that. And I think that there are ways. I am not here promoting the resort in Cancun for 5 days where you only deal with kind of hotel staff and then get on your plane home. Though I know people enjoy that. And I know sometimes that's an important way to step into something. But I also feel that you're not actually visiting a place or visiting a culture when you do that. So let's just have that clarity there. But there is a way to integrate and do it in a respectful way, I would say. Wouldn't you?
Yeah, I think it's about the awareness. So you brought something to mind. I listen to podcasts. I told you earlier that I'm a cycler. So I cycle every morning, and I listen to podcasts consistently. And they were talking about Albert Camus. He wrote this book, and I can't remember what the book was called, but it was talking about this gentleman who thought he
Right.
was the greatest gift, to humanity. He thought he was this wonderful person. He did these nice things, kind acts. He helped gentleman across the road. He was loved by everyone. And he finally had this realization that he was doing these things for the appearance of being kind and being generous and being good. And, the whole long, not going to get into a long philosophical discussion right now, but it was understanding that we as humans, we are self-inclined, we are
Oh,
self-absorbed, even the most humble, most kind person at our essence, there's still part of us that are worried about our self-interest. So we need to have that awareness, that it's okay to do things for ourselves at times. It's okay to do things for others, but we need to just be more open. Is that what you're kind of getting into? I mean, I don't know. I'm going off on a
well,
tangent.
absolutely. I mean, that's even why I say even kind acts make me feel better. So it's entirely self-interest. Is it better to do kind acts to make yourself feel better, or to be a jerk to somebody to make yourself feel better? So, I mean,
Exactly.
there is also that part that I think that it also does benefit other people. But of course. And I think with travel, there's absolutely self-interest everywhere. And when you're a parent, there's a lot of self-interest because you're also protecting your tribe and your group. And I find that I am at my most fierce when my mama bear comes out, and I'm not kind and I'm not patient and I am not and that's part of my own protective resource. But it doesn't mean that we can't work toward being a better person and trying to be kind to other people.
Well, now speaking of, you brought up the mama thing. So yeah, you see the title I have. I took that from your book, your subtitle. How was all this going about, writing books, going through your transition in life and everything with kids? What was that experience like for you?
It was a lot of work. I only have one son. He's now 16, and I've always been a single mom. And it was a lot of work. I mean, in some ways, I was able to make a lot of these choices without having to negotiate with anyone else. So there are times when it's simpler. I hear a lot of people online saying, my partner won't let me travel, won't let me do this, won't. Um, does that mean, I wish my son's father was involved. That would be really beautiful for both of us, but that's not the case. So we just make do with all of that. And I think that women and moms and single moms, we just are badass. I know this is probably a family show, but I mean, the kind of multitasking, the kind of immense tasks that we have to take on every single day. I mean, I'm not alone. Every mom out there is kind of a hero in my book, whether you have one kid, six kids, a partner, more partners, I don't know, whatever your orientation. It's just a lot of work, and it's a lot of work to do it mindfully. So I think my greatest growth has been trying to be more patient and a kinder person. The logistics of it also really played a part. But one of the reasons I moved to Mexico is just that it was so darn expensive here. And I was trying to spend time with my son. I was running a radio station. Then my mom died, and just that juggling and trying to make ends meet. And my son was the one that was kind of falling to the side because he was also very resourceful and resilient, having traveled a lot. And when I realized that that's what I was sacrificing to kind of get the bills paid, I was like, wait a minute, my priorities are completely wrong. And let me go somewhere where I don't have to be so financially stressed, and I can spend some time with him. And I can heal. I mean, obviously, then you also have to spend time to grieve. And that was the other part. When you're a single mom, it's like, oh no, well, you still have to go to work and take care of the house and feed your child. And, there's nobody there to kind of take some of that off your shoulders. So it's a lot of work. And it's funny. I find that I'm kind of this resource. I have a number of moms or friends, calling me who want to be single moms or who are suddenly single mom. How do you do it? And what do you say? What do you, I'm like, we all do it differently. I don't know. move abroad, go to Mexico. It's cheaper. It's beautiful. They love kids. I mean, when you go to Mexico, you realize how much people don't really like kids in this country. They're not very kind. They don't have structures that support them. They don't, you go to other places and you're like, wow, this exists to actually support parents and to support kids. And kids are out with their families. We're not, shunting them off to other people. And it's very different. And this is one of the things about travel that I write a lot about, is just that you gain perspectives. You gain perspectives that you don't have if you stay in one place. Not saying that your one place is bad at all, but sometimes you have nothing to compare it to. So yeah, just seeing how other systems work. Wow, the healthcare system in some of these countries actually pays for its citizens. You don't lose your home. When I came back after 4 years in Mexico, the thing that I tell people, like, oh, the culture shock must have been incredible. It was like this low-level anxiety that I felt everywhere. This kind of fear, a lot of it revolved around certainly the cost of living, but healthcare, that if anybody should get sick, we could lose our house, we could lose our car, we could lose everything. And that fear was so intense because there was no real social safety net here. And so you work like heck, but you could lose it like that in an accident. And so that anxiety was so palpable to me. And I feel like after a number of years, I've now started it myself. Now I'm back to that anxious, like, how do we manage it? So I can't wait to get back down to Mexico for a little bit, just to take a deep breath and calm down again.
Yeah. Now, are y'all planning on moving back down there for long term?
If I had my way, we would move down permanently, but my son really liked going back to a traditional high school too. I mean, there are the pros and cons in world schooling, and he really liked that social aspect. He's 16 years old. It isn't the school that he is in love with. It's the social life. It's let's go driving, let's have a party, let's experiment, this is necessarily what he's doing. I mean, he's individuating and he's doing what he needs to do. So we're leaving for half a year. He says he wants to come back and go back to high school, but we also have a beautiful school down in Mexico that he was attending before that he may start again. So for now, it's just going to be half a year, so that he'll come back and finish the second semester and then his senior year. But we'll see. I mean, it's pretty flexible and we're leaving it up in the air. Making sure he has a really good, lively social life has been part of our traveling goal. We've met incredible families on the road, and he's mad at me that we're not flying up to Canada to go camping with three other world schooling families, because we're going to go see our family in France first. But we have these connections, and there are these hubs, and there are these reunions around where people can connect and just talk about it, because we are different. We've chosen to live differently. We have different perspectives. We have, in a chapter in my book, I talk about the kind of friendships we have, that we could sit around a table and say, I really want to go to Thailand. Is there a great place to go, help animals? And someone will say, oh yeah, we were in Chiang Mai and there was this amazing animal sanctuary. You should go here. And I bring that up here and they're like, you're traveling again? Like, how do you afford that? And what are you doing? And it's sometimes tinged, not always, but, a little bit of judgment and a little bit of assumption and about where finances come. And I try to say, if you want to do it, let me talk to you about it, because it's not necessarily about finances. It's about intention.
Yeah.
So what's your intention?
Okay, so yeah, you brought up some really good points, and I'm just curious, how would you know to set those intentions, and how does someone, go about, deciding to travel that way?
I think this is the $1 million question. I mean, this is the biggest part. And I have some questions in the book where I have people just really sit and ask, basically, are you happy with your life? Are you spending enough time with your kids? Is there anything you can change? I mean, I think part of it is just being open to questioning. The same thing that we talked about traveling and having curiosity. The same thing is about being self-reflective in your own life and checking in every once in a while. I mean, you and I, I'm sure, have both heard people say, I'm miserable in my job, or I don't have enough time, and I'm too stressed. And it's like, okay, is there a way to change it? Maybe there isn't. Maybe there isn't. But you know what? 9 times out of 10, there might be. Can you do it? Can you work a little bit less? Can you work remote? Are there things you can do? So I feel like we don't question enough. We just accept without questioning and say, well, this is my job. I'm going to have it for the rest of my life. I need this pension. So people I met on the road were like, well, that's what I had. And then they fired me. And I was like, wait, what? This was the job I was going to have for the rest of my life. This was my pension. This was everything. Or they had a heart attack at 42, or, something like this. So just think, this idea of, I am going to do everything so that I can actually live life when I retire is a really questionable way to be going through your life, because you may not make it there. And if you make it there, you may not be in the same health that you are now. There's this book, Die with Zero, that is the talk of a lot of kind of financial independence movements and stuff, because he also does this arc. He says the time when you have the most money is not necessarily the time when you have the energy and the desire to be doing these kind of adventures. So is there a middle place where you can meet and say, I have the money and I have the energy, or I'm working toward it, knowing that when you retire, maybe that's time to be a little bit more quiet in your life. Maybe you won't want to do all of these things. And if you are really counting on that, then that's always a crapshoot, because, they say you may not be here tomorrow, but really you may not be here tomorrow. So are you doing what you want to do? You have permission to change if you want to. You have permission. And that's really what I was trying to get across in this book, that whether or not you go traveling, whether or not you even have a family, people are like, well, I don't have a family. This doesn't apply to me. And it's like, it doesn't. Like, do you questioning your life and making sure you're happy and making sure you have a good quality of life? I assure you, it applies to everyone. And if you do a kind of examination and you say, you know what, this is awesome and I love my life, then hallelujah. Congratulations, because not everybody feels that way. Right. So I think it's that it's very hard to know, of course, and I think that it changes throughout our life. But if we don't even allow ourselves to question and to do that kind of real deep examination and say, maybe it'll be a little bit scary for a while, but you know what, I can do this. I have these resources. There's a woman who's coming on my retreat and she's nervous about finances. She owns her own home. She already has a remote job where she makes lots of money. She's single. She doesn't have kids to care for. And I'm like, so what part of this is? And so sometimes it's just kind of showing the mirror, reflecting back the mirror and saying, actually, you're in a better place than a huge number of people out there. How can we make this work so that you feel comfortable with it? And that's a lot of what we talked about. And it's a lot of what I talk about with some families who want to go on the road. And I think reading books like this and meeting people like you and listening to podcasts like this, interacting with Worldschooling groups online, you start seeing that people are doing it, and then you don't feel alone. And I think that's really the goal of all of these conversations, is to say, people are doing it. You want to know how we're doing it? You can do it too. But again, intention.
I think
because it's not always easy, right? It's not always easy.
I think it's really about changing that perspective. I think what we've been, so engrossed in as a culture, at least a Western culture since the Industrial Revolution, is we're running to this finish line, and this finish line of retirement, of death, like that's where we're going. And you keep bringing up that you're in transition. I always like to think, if you sit back and think about it, we're always in transition. And we need to embrace that. We need to embrace that impermanence and accept that, it's okay to not know where we're going. It's okay to flex and to change. And I think that's where we'll find the most, joy and enjoyment in life. I love what you're touching on. I think it's real serendipitous that the last episode that I just did was with another author. Her name was Alexis Anik, and she wrote a book called Jump Before You Fall. And I highly recommend you check it out. But she wrote, it's a bunch of short stories about her and her husband that they took a sailboat and traveled. And they traveled for, I don't remember if it was 4 years. And then they came back, and then they ended up doing workaways for like 7 years, where they would just go, and it's amazing. But her whole philosophy was like, the jump before you fall concept was, they were planning on doing all this when they're 50, but life changed. They were lucky they went out when they were in their 30s, because now they're in their 50s and they probably wouldn't be able to do it, like you're saying. So it's such a coincidence. You know, I interviewed her and then interviewed you. I feel like these are two very applicable, very complementary, you know, concepts. Yeah, I don't. We've talked about so much. I'd love to keep talking. I don't want to hold you on forever. But I'd love to have you on my other channel for sure over on Worldschooling Junction and talk to you more about the Worldschooling aspect. Before we go, I do want to touch on, you know, just a little bit more about your book. So it is written in turn, is it like chapters are written as interviews, or how is it structured?
We have interviews are kind of sprinkled throughout. So it starts with, and a lot of it is through my own personal journey. So the way life sometimes plays out, and then there'll be an interview with an individual there, facing fears, attitude, assessing your life. I actually include a journaling exercise in there. And then really the time is now. And so after almost each of these chapters, there's an interview at the end. Somebody about this, setting your priorities, as we were just talking about, and also some of the limitations. So much is about setting your priorities and building your community and doing it before you leave. And then launch. So then there are larger sections. That is dream, launch, learn, money, really important, and connect. And then within that are the subheadings of, you know, underneath launch, what happens when we get there, slowing down, what are some of the challenges, technology, you know, learning. And I talk to a lot of people who've done really extensive studying and have great feedback on how to educate your kids. And there's no one way. There's no one way at all. There are all of these different options that you can have. And so I have a number of people talking about that, and health and wellness, and then really how to connect. So it really kind of takes you through this full journey, but everybody's story is a little bit different. And a little bit about what you were saying before, I think COVID was just such a big wake-up call for us that things may not always be the way they seem, right? And things can happen that come out of the blue that radically change the way we live and the way we work, and being adaptable. And travel is so amazing for building our resilience and our flexibility. And I think it's really, really good to push yourself every once in a while, even if you're immensely comfortable in your beautiful house. I have a beautiful house. I have this amazing community. I have my 2 little dogs who come with me, not past Mexico usually, but and so sometimes it gets more painful. It's like we talked about going to Burning Man, that crazy festival in the desert, and I was like, oh, I don't know if I have the energy now. I don't. It's a beautiful art exhibit. It's the most extraordinary art exhibit I can ever imagine. But do I have the energy? I'm not sure I do anymore. And that's okay. That's okay. There'll just be different travels when you get older. They'll be different. And what you want to show your kids will be different, and obviously age appropriate at different times. So when I was doing my graduate work in Cambodia, you know, here I was interviewing survivors of the Khmer Rouge, and the stories were really powerful. And you're in Tol Sling, in this prison where they tortured people, and they haven't cleaned it up very much. And so, you know, I would hire people to go just play with my son and play ball outside and not listen to any of this. And I did so much to try to balance that out. So again, the age appropriate, there's some really heavy things out there, but this is all our history. This whole trend in America of trying to kind of whitewash really difficult parts of history, I think it's very dangerous. I think it's very, very dangerous. So there is a point of really exposing our children and ourselves to real history and monuments around the world that really can tell a story. And also having a good time, because you know what? Life is short. Life is short. So enjoy it.
I heard that I really loved was that we were raising adults, not children. So that was something that we really subscribed to with the way we raise our kids, you know, like.
Absolutely. And I always say to my son, I don't want to put any pressure on you, but you and your generation, you know, this is the world that we're leaving you. And I'm trying my best to leave you a really beautiful world, but you're going to have to be creative and resilient and come up with solutions to some really, really intractable problems. We've always had problems. I mean, when I was doing my graduate work in wars and all, we'd go home after the day, you know, studying conflicts every single day. And this professor was like, are you kidding? This is the most peaceful time in history. Like when I was young, we were hiding underneath our desks, you know, doing atomic bomb drills and under our desk. I mean, it's so funny now.
I know when that would really do nothing, but yeah.
The irony, but so it's all relative. And we are creating these beautiful, resilient please make them creative humans in the world who are going to have to deal with a lot. And hopefully they can help improve the world that we've left them.
Yeah. Now, just before we end this, I want to make sure we know, who would you recommend this book to?
Any kind of families who have often said to themselves, I would love to go traveling sometime, or any individuals, even though there is a lot of family focus on the education. But a lot of it is to individuals who maybe want to travel full time, for remote workers. I do have, a guide for families who want to travel the world, because I am a single mom and I do interview other single moms in there. But people who may want to change their environment to improve the quality of life, I would read this. Just to know that there are alternatives. They may not be within America, but they also may be. And the idea of moving from a high cost of living area to a low cost of living area is something that is very scary for people. But if you would like to have an easier life, I mean, some of these decisions are very practical and logistical, and some are very big ideological. Can you go to a country where you don't speak a language? Can you take this challenge? I have somebody who just stopped me, my neighbor who's coming on my retreat, and she said, I'm so terrified to even be going to Mexico. And I said, but you're not going to be alone. You're not going to be alone. First of all, these are the warmest people you're ever going to meet, and we're going to be there with you. So I think that for people who might have fear about traveling, fear about how to connect with other people on the road, fear that they might get sick. I mean, I go through a lot of different stories in here. So I think there's a wide range, but any family who would like to travel for a month or a year or a lifetime, definitely pick it up, because a lot of it, it just covers a lot of groundwork, a lot of basics there, and hopefully will be a starting point to really jump off and have a really nice adventure.
Fantastic. Now, where can everyone find you? Where can they find your book? Where can they find more about you?
I have a few places that I think I'm hoping to consolidate soon. I have a blog site, adventuringa2z.com, where I'm putting a lot of my book and my retreat work is at travelforabetterlife.com. And I'm going to try to start putting everything together there. You can find my book on Amazon. You can, on any one of these websites, you can also click on here and get the book. There is, as I mentioned before, an audiobook and a Kindle version. But please do follow me and stay tuned, because I do hope to be writing a lot and kind of changing my own view to more women in midlife, people transitioning, and how to really find that intention. Going through the passion test, I'm going to take people through various exercises to kind of identify that, as you said. How do you know? Like, how do you know what you love? Because there's an idea you can't wantonly just follow your passion necessarily. There has to be kind of logistics and structure involved. But you certainly should follow something that makes you really happy, because life is short. So no time to be miserable.
I agree wholeheartedly. But thank you so much for joining me. And for everyone who stayed all the way through the end of this episode, thank you so much for joining us today. All those links that Zelie mentioned will be located down below. Her blog post will be up soon on michaelkimriobooks.com, so you can read her words verbatim over there on the website as well. I highly encourage you to check out her book, Hit the Road. If you can, please leave a review. Those reviews are big for all us writers. So other writers listening and you readers out there, any book you read, any book you pick up, especially for us self-published indie writers, please leave a review. It really helps us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, and spread the word on what we do, and you can help us make a difference, and you can do it yourself. So thank you again, Zelie, for joining me, and I hope to see you again soon.
And thank you, Michael, for this conversation. It's so wonderful. And anybody can reach out if you have questions, or just say hello, follow me on Facebook. I love to talk about this, and I just love what you're doing. So thank you so much, Michael.
My pleasure. And for all of you watching, thank you so much. If you liked what you heard, click subscribe. Many more authors in the chute coming up, many still out there on my channel already. I'd love for you to check out their stories and follow them all. Read more and write mindfully.